specialization is young adults and learners in educational institutions. So currently I am the counselor at ADMI, and in my roles I do counseling to students. I also work with their parents, family members, and I also train the teachers sometimes on mental health issues.
Okay.
Right.
So what would you say, since we're focusing on depression, what would you say are some of the causes of depression? I know there are many, but if you were to give a few.
Yeah, so depression is caused by a host of factors. It could be genetic. Some people are more predisposed to be depressed, so that would make it run in the family. In some instances, it's a biochemical setup, meaning the chemistry in the body, and some people are just more likely to be, to have, for example, hormonal imbalance that would lead to depression. And then largely most of the causes of depression are social. So as you know, human beings are social beings, and we live in systems, and a lot of times people get depressed owing to thought processes, the kind of thoughts they have, and that affects their feelings.
I hear that also extended drug use can have an effect on the biochemical system of the brain, and that can also lead to depression. Is that true?
Oh yeah. So drugs and alcohol are very key cause for depression. Alcohol in itself is a depressant. So what that would mean is if you took a small dose of alcohol, you'll probably have a high and feel like you're stimulated. But then after a while, you crash. So these chemicals mimic the actions of neurotransmitters. So it's really tampering with the brain processes. And so those are some of the factors that would lead to depression.
I know you said you see mostly young adults and adolescents, but what did you say like the majority age group you see? Like the majority get teenagers, or since you're right now working at ADMI, except from your current situation, what is a typical age group you see?
Right. So it's what I would like to call emerging adults. 18 to 35 would be the biggest age group, and specifically 20 to 26 would be the age group that is the highest. And this is a very interesting phase of life because it's characterized by lots of transitions. Mostly students who are coming into ADMI have been in another school system that was quite different from here, and they come here and they have all these different moving parts in their life. For example, family. A lot of young adults are really idealistic and dreaming of, wonderful things that they want to do for their lives. Some of them on their own, some with their families. So it's quite a period of transition.
Right. Okay. What would you say is, I wouldn't say complete recovery, but the percentage of people who eventually go back to the point where they can say, I feel better, or I feel how I used to before I fell into a depressive cycle or was diagnosed with depression?
Right. That's a very interesting question, but I can say the biggest problem, and this is the most important point I'm going to make today, the biggest problem with depression is the cases of untreated depression. Otherwise, depression is a highly treatable set of symptoms. And depression can occur as a full disorder, what we call, the full condition, or a set of symptoms that have, effects on functioning. But most people who get into treatment actually recover. So I would say a very high percentage. We don't have statistics in Kenya, but globally, you could say 80 to 100%. Will get, if they attend to all the recovery. And then another point to note on that is most people in the population, let's say about a third of people in any population have some level of depression at any time. So it's one of those conditions that can occur at a mild level, moderate, severe, or really severe. So a lot of us are having a day when you feel down, So, and that can you can naturally recover from that, you see. So, not everybody has to go for counseling, but counseling would be one of the avenues that would be really useful.
Now, from the people you see in council, do you
Right.
think there's somewhat of a gender imbalance? Do you see that you tend to get more women or more men, or is it just, here and there depends?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. So in this college, fortunately, there's very good mobilization and recruitment and awareness creation by students themselves. So like students at ADMI are quite aware of mental health and they self-refer a lot of the times. And then the other half of the students who come in are those who are referred by another source, right? Usually it would be either the school system or the family system. They would send them for counseling, right? So I would say in a nutshell that a lot of the people who come in are people who are motivated to come in, or perhaps they're not. Yeah, but at the end of the day, if they follow the treatment recommendations, they get better.
Almost to piggyback on the point you just said, obviously, like talking to friends and referring people, how do you think you can educate more people on the benefits of therapy and depression other than mouth to mouth?
Right. I am a big advocate of social support. As I started off by saying, we are social beings, and going to see a counselor should be the last resort. I really think if we had healthy families, healthy systems, healthy functioning, even as individuals, we wouldn't have to, necessarily go for counseling. But now when you start to notice that you're feeling tired or you're feeling low in your mood and you're really not able to get out of it, that's a good time to get a professional. So the advantage of going to see a professional is that with lots of extensive training, we do assessments and we can get to know at what level of depression you have and what kind of interventions that we could start to implement.
Now, the thing is, for our assignment, we're quite interested on why men don't necessarily go out to look for that social support. Is it socialization? Is it potentially genetic, in your opinion? Like, why does it seem that more women, when we spoke to them, they found they're able to get that social support from their friends, but it seems that men hold their problems and carry them until it's to the point where it's almost unmanageable and they fall into cycles of addiction or depression or suicide.
Right. I would say several points. One is what I like to call the hapa syndrome. So in our settings, being ill is only a physical manifestation. So the hapa syndrome is something that has now been studied and well documented. Is when until when you start having body pains or headaches and you can medicalize your condition, that's when you say you're not well, right? So there's been a slow shift now and people can begin to talk about other symptoms, but I think it's because we really only focus on physical symptoms as I'm not doing well, right? Then for men, what is uniquely so is that there's a largely masculinity, macho culture around being a man. So being a man means you need to be strong, you should not ask for help, you should not be seen to be weak. Plus, going to see a counselor means that you're a failure. So there's that narrative, and that unfortunately increases stigma. And a lot of like the students I see, they have now come to realize that asking for help is actually a sign of strength. So there is a very strong macho culture that really has a man to be a person who can stand in front of people and has to provide leadership. And so if a man is not able to fulfill that social obligation, they really have it rough. And I think that's how come more men will be very fearful of getting into counseling.
What would you say? I understand that to be formally diagnosed with depression, you have to meet the criteria in the DSM-5, but just from a layman's point of view, what would you say are the signs of depression? Like if you can see it in a family member or a friend, what would you say are the signs?
Right. So as I say, starting off with physical symptoms is very key. Usually, there'll be a change in behavior. So either eating too much or eating too little, sleeping too much or sleeping too little, feeling fatigued, so energy shifting. So really feeling lethargic. Some people say they feel lazy, but I don't like to use the word lazy. Lazy is a quite moralistic term. That would be like feeling slow, fatigued, or also feeling hyper, like really on edge and really agitated. And then especially in men, it really shows up in these cultures: anger, irritability, aggression, and particularly because men are more prone to more risky lifestyle behaviors. So, for example, alcohol and drugs, sexual behaviors, suicide. Men are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than women. And that's a very stark reality, because although depression affects men just as equally as it affects women, you find that for men, if they do not create a sense that I'm not okay and I need an outlet for this, and whenever they would like to commit suicide, most of the time they'll be successful. It will be more lethal.
I actually heard about that women use less lethal forms for suicide, but men either tend to shoot themselves, really aggressive forms where they're guaranteed to die. Women tend to either overdose or do, let's not call it passive suicide, but less.
It's interesting because this year is the World Mental Health. This year's aim for World Mental Health Day is suicide prevention and mental health promotion. And suicide has many reasons, but depression is one of the top reasons for suicide. So if we can rein in on depression in men, I think we can really solve the suicide problem.
And yesterday when I was interviewing a psychiatrist, he told me about, depression is about to become one of the top, I don't know what the proper definition is, but it's something, a cause that takes away from your economic, social, one is about to become, it's currently the third in the world. Is it DISAB or?
So it's the largest global burden of disease. So there's a way all illnesses are ranked globally. And the reason I was really drawn to this topic is I'm currently doing a study on depression. And my study is on deaf adults and their access to counseling. And I found that depression is like a very key reason for even other physical illness, like for example obesity. It can increase your risk for cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure. And so depression is all-encompassing. We should not just look at the individual, but the family system where they come from, their friends and social network systems, as well as diet, sleep, nutrition, appetite, for example, exercise. All those things contribute. I think different parts of the country have different effects. For example, in the city, a lot of us are just in very polluted atmospheres, small spaces, and there's high stress because of jobs, economy, everything.
Stuck in traffic
and
constantly.
There's always the scare of terrorism, like day by day. And so it's highly likely that through the lifetime, if you're male, you're going to be in situations that, exacerbate depression symptoms.
So kind of to piggyback almost off the Jeff point, I want to ask you how, not only necessarily to disabled people, but how accessible do you think real counseling and information is? Because we talk about the city, but for instance, when I go to the countryside and go to shops, quote unquote, most people are still kind of hesitant about the idea of mental illness. It seems to be this stigma that mental illness is something brought in by the West, when in reality it's always been there. It's just about the conversation that's happening now, and it's coming more to the light.
Yeah, you're very right. I think we need to first of all start by conceptualizing the people who live in rural areas, defining it in their own terms. As I said, here a lot of the symptoms are only physical. So what we call hapa syndrome is a common term that's used in this setting. And so you find somebody having pains that are inexplicable. If you go to the doctor says she's fine or he's fine, and the pain shifts. Today it's a headache, tomorrow it's a backache, then the foot aches and everywhere. But the human experience is universal, but it would be also a good thing to really respect cultures and how this condition shows up in different spaces, so that, for example, if I'm working with rural youth who have no access to professional support, then I think the biggest intervention there would be outreach and awareness, knowledge creation, right? So here, for example, in the city, a lot of students, as I say, they know a lot of things. We have what we call Dr. Google. So a lot of students are really proactive. Students who come to my office tell me, I knew what to do, I just Googled how to deal with this, and I started doing it. So I think that there's more that needs to be done with awareness and outreach, so that it becomes a part of normal conversation.
I actually learned something very interesting yesterday, that the government under the Mental Health Act requires all, I think it's medical facilities or hospitals, to have a registered